Okay, we're going to take a look now at some of the recent advances in intelligence testing, and this too is a very interesting story. I mean, we've laid the groundwork now with the history. You've seen what some of these standardized tests have looked like. You know what some of their shortcomings are. Let's again take a look at what's out there now. I don't want to say that we have completely um, gotten rid of the standardized tests, and I mean they're still used today, but on a much more limited basis. There's other ways really of taking a look at intelligence. And there's three ways in particular that we're going to take a look at. We're going to take a look at Gardner's theory of what's called multiple intelligence. Then we're going to take a look at Sternberg's what's called the triarchic theory of intelligence. And then we're going to take a look at Coleman's theory of emotional intelligence. And I think that each one of these has, something important to offer. Let's first take a look at Gardner's 8 types of intelligence. And Howard Gardner at Harvard University really, felt maybe about 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, that standardized intelligence tests have really taken us as far as they possibly can. Their utility is relatively limited. They tend to focus in mainly on mathematical and verbal skills, the kinds of skills that are important for doing well in school. But he wants to expand the concept of intelligence, and I think in his theory he does an excellent job of this. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at each one of these particular areas of intelligence that Howard Gardner has gone about. So his 8 types of intelligence, the first one is what he calls logical mathematical intelligence. And what he means by this is individuals that are able to work well with numbers. They're able to work very well in terms of logical reasoning. They can handle, long chains of reasoning. And indeed, individuals that are scientists, individuals that are mathematicians, this is the kind of intelligence that you need. And again, these are the kinds of skills that typically are developed in a school setting. Logical, mathematical. Um, we then have what he calls linguistic intelligence. Again, being verbal, being sensitive to the meaning of words, being sensitive to different kinds of languages and the function of languages. We look at individuals who are journalists, individuals who do a significant amount of writing, a poet, for example. These individuals must have a high level of linguistic intelligence, and again, this is something that we see developed in a school setting. So linguistic intelligence. The third type of intelligence is what Howard Gardner calls naturalist intelligence, and by this he means, we live amongst many different species, and we have to have the ability to interact with those species, with other living creatures. We have to be sensitive to the kind of environment that we are exposed to. So indeed, someone who's a biologist, someone who's an environmentalist, has to develop this kind of intelligence that's called naturalist intelligence. Would also say that there's something that we would call musical intelligence. Understanding and appreciating the many different forms of musical expression, understanding rhythm, understanding pitch, for example. A person who is a composer, a person who plays any kind of an instrument, must have developed this type of intelligence that he calls musical intelligence. A fifth type of intelligence is what he calls spatial intelligence, really being able to understand your visual spatial world and to enact and perform transformations of your perceptions. Individuals who are navigators, individuals who are skilled sculptors, for example, have to develop that visual spatial skill in order to kind of see things from a different perspective. So that's spatial. We also have what he calls bodily kinesthetic intelligence, and for this I think of athletes. I think of an individual who is a dancer, individuals who can control their own body and can handle objects, for example, in a very skillful manner. A seventh type of intelligence he calls interpersonal intelligence, and anybody who is a therapist or a salesperson, being able to understand and appreciate moods of other people, their temperaments, their motivations, their desires, being able to detect that is absolutely crucial in any kind of a sales position. It's crucial in any kind of a therapist position. We call this interpersonal intelligence. And then we have what he calls interpersonal intelligence, and simply put, what he means by this is how well do you know yourself? How well do you know about your strengths? How well do you know about your weaknesses? Do you have accurate self-knowledge and self-awareness? So again, assessing your own feelings and discriminating amongst different feelings that you have, knowing, what you can do and what you can't do, again, knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So again, Gardner believes that we got to get outside the box of just this, book smarts kind of a thing, where we have to really focus in on there being many different types of intelligence. Yet another important contribution here is in what is called the triarchic theory of intelligence that was developed by Robert Sternberg, in which he talks about analytic intelligence, that's academic problem solving, creative intelligence, being, thinking outside the box, and practical intelligence, street smarts, common sense. So when we take a look at this triarchic theory, when we talk about analytic intelligence, we're talking about book smarts. These are the academically oriented problem-solving skills that you're expected to acquire. Traditional intelligence tests assess these kinds of things. Sternberg believes that this is not unimportant, but he believes that another type of intelligence that he calls practical intelligence, street smarts, is far more important. Coping with the everyday kinds of changes and demands that occur in an individual's life. Again, this is something that's called street smarts, and Sternberg believes that this is far more important than the kinds of analytical skills that are developed in, a formal academic kind of setting. He also talks about creative intelligence. He also refers to it as divergent thinking, meaning thinking outside the box. Adapting your thinking to solving different kinds of problems, novel problems. So when we take a look at Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence, one of the things that is its strength is that he has developed these tests for practical intelligence for many different occupations, for people who are involved in police work, for people who are lawyers, for people who are doctors, for people who are clerks, people who are involved in middle management and high management positions. And these tests of practical intelligence are much, much better predictors of success in a particular occupation. Again, when you take a look at Sternberg's theory, he's saying, your ability to adapt to a changing world is really the key factor in your success. So indeed, this is, an incredibly important element he believes, of intelligence. So traditional kinds of achievement tests and aptitude tests, standardized intelligence tests, don't predict job success. But Sternberg's tests of practical intelligence do predict success, job success. And so again, this is one of the real big strengths of his emphasis upon this practical intelligence, this street smarts, if you will, as being crucial for success in a job. Typically, IQ tests are very poor predictors of job success. How many times really have you heard of individuals who are off the charts in terms of standardized IQ tests, but they can't hold down a job, right? And they can't do well in a particular job, have a bounce around from job to job to job to job. So indeed, practical intelligence. Lastly, one of the more recent trends has been in terms of the assessment of what we call emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, who you see here, has been at the forefront of this. It's the ability to read the emotions of another person and to read them accurately. It's the ability to respond appropriately to the emotions that are expressed by other people. It's being able to motivate yourself. It's being aware of your own emotions. It's regulating and controlling your emotional responses as a reaction to other individuals. So again, this is a real important advance. And take a look. Coleman has developed standardized tests for emotional intelligence, and here's some of the questions, just a sampling of them, and they're yes/no questions. The individuals taking this test has to answer simply yes or no. I'm aware of the nonverbal messages I send to others, yes or no. I help other people feel better when they're down. Again, yes or no answer. I have control over my emotions. Again, yes or no. I easily recognize my emotions as I experience them. Again, yes or no. I motivate myself by imagining a good outcome to tasks I've taken on. Yes or no. I know why my emotions change. Again, this really is a very different way of assessing intelligence. And essentially what we're saying is this. There are individuals who have IQs that are off the charts, and they do exceptionally well on standardized intelligence tests. But they act like a child oftentimes. They have the emotional intelligence of a child. And this really keeps them back in terms of having success in their life. I believe then that these tests of emotional intelligence are much better predictors of success later on in life, in contrast to these standardized kinds of intelligence tests that really have had their day, if you will, for probably about a 50, 60-year period of time. So when we try to provide some conclusions to this in terms of intelligence and intelligence testing, standardized tests are limited. They stratify test takers, and they stratify them by race, gender, class, and culture, right? Again, they're heavily biased oftentimes against certain races. They can be gender biased, they can be class biased, they can be culture biased. They don't really adequately assess creativity or character or practical know-how. And these are things that can take you a long way in life. And standardized tests don't help us to understand these things at all. They promote the idea that people are born, okay, with this range of intellectual potential that's going to be absolutely crucial for their success later on in life. So this is the standardized intelligence tests are not totally extinct. They're still used today, but they're used more as an adjunct than they are as a major way of informing us about a person's potential, okay, for success. So again, we need new ways of assessing intelligence, and that's something that we just recently talked about. Again, practical intelligence, emotional intelligence. These may be much better predictors, okay, of success in life, in contrast to standardized intelligence tests. Um, Again, this little cartoon here, which I love, this human resource person is saying, "I see you did well in school, but what real world skills do you have?" And the individual says, "Well, tests. I can take tests." Well, you may be able to take tests and perform well on them in terms of standardized kinds of intelligence tests, but in terms of practical intelligence and emotional intelligence, you might not score very well at all. So indeed, this is where we're at right now in terms of testing, and we're going to move on in this area to take a look at the whole issue of race and intelligence and genes and intelligence, and it's a fascinating area. So that's what we'll do in our next few lectures.